this is the easiest way to think about it, I think. It's just a big probability machine that's guessing what you're going to say next, and then is taught how to use, natural language to convey that to you, if that makes sense. I'm gonna have to maybe click this way. Maybe I'm not close enough. There we go. So a lot of things that you're already using in your daily life have AI, and they have for years, even before ChatGPT exploded into the mind's share of the population. Things like your Netflix movie suggestions, for instance, that's all powered with AI. Like I mentioned, your autofill, if you're using a Microsoft like a Word product to type a document out, the autofill, the spell checker, that's all kind of based in the same AI technology. And then Google Maps, for instance. Everybody's using Google Maps at this point. I remember when I was a kid and we used to travel around, I would be the navigator, and I would sit in the back seat with an atlas and tell my mom like where to go. Nobody does that now, right? Nobody has an atlas in their car. Maybe some people still do, but I haven't seen one in a while. So that's all driven by the same type of technology. So it's weird when people are so resistant to using this technology, but they don't realize that they've already been using it for probably 10 years. This is just sort of a new evolution of it. Let's see. Go next. There we go. Some ways that I like to use AI and that I feel like it's reliable. For instance, I'll use it to take notes during meetings. It does a really good job at that. It does a good job of listening and transcribing what's being said, and then at the end even summarizing it. For me, this is a fairly safe way to use AI because you can verify it. You can read through the notes, read through the transcription, and say, okay, that's wrong, that didn't happen, and you can delete that, and then you'll have the accurate depiction of what was said. There's a tool from Google called NotebookLM, which is really nice because when you're using something like ChatGPT or Gemini, it's collecting all this information from all over the internet and potentially giving you false answers, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But something like NotebookLM, you feed it exactly what you want it to talk about. So if you have a book, for instance, you can put a book into this program, and you can have this program summarize the book for you. You can have it even give you a podcast, which is like a two people bantering back and forth about the subject matter of the book. Obviously, like if you want to enjoy a book, don't do this. But if you need to summarize something quickly, it's good for that kind of thing. Even in medicine, Corewell, for instance, is using, and it's optional, not every doctor opts in or not, but Corewell is using note-taking technology in their clinical practice. So this kind of saves them time. They don't have to spend, they don't have to have their head down on their laptop. They can actually look at people and like have a conversation instead of just trying to take notes because they have to take notes, they're obligated to, and they have to be accurate for people's safety. So that's just some, I think, practical ways that AI is being used right now that are mostly safe. So these are some common AI models that you may have heard of. I talked about ChatGPT already a little bit. There's Claude, which is kind of a similar thing. It's just a chatbot that you chat with a little bit. There's things like DALL-E and Midjourney, which create the images. And a lot of AIs do this now. You can create images within Gemini, within Copilot. There's GitHub Copilot, which is beyond me because it's all about coding and developing software. And there's Stable Diffusion, which is another AI-generated image kind of software. And the video software is really where it's getting kind of scary because video AI stuff looks very good now, and it's hard to distinguish between what's real and what's not. And I'll talk a little bit of that. But the point of this is that there are different tools, AI tools, for pretty much anything you can think of. And I think that's maybe where we're headed, and I hope where we're headed is that they become more specific and less, broad, generalized things that may or may not give you the right information, because the more specific these tools get, the better they're going to be at getting you what you want information-wise. So let's talk about education a little bit, because I know that's a big topic of concern. We have students at OU who have been caught using AI to turn in papers, completely fabricated papers. And it's difficult because how do you prove that? I mean, it's difficult to point to something specific and say, okay, that's AI, you cheated, you fail this. But there are ways, and we're kind of figuring out that a little bit as we go. But I think the point that I'm trying to make with this slide in particular is that the way we've taught our kids, and even up to college and med school particularly, like med school is the first 2 years, there's just memorizing textbook after textbook, and it is just so much for them to deal with. But it's the same in even my kid's 8 years old. She has to memorize, how to do math, all this stuff. And I think what AI could potentially offer us is a way to change the way we teach. And a lot of it, I think, could transition into this live group discussion, having critical debates, being present with one another in the classroom, and actually using our brains and having AI be like, the vault of information that we can pull from in order to have these discussions with one another. The calculator analogy, I think, is a good one. I think most of us are old enough to remember when calculators were introduced. They changed the way math works, right? Like no longer, and I still see people complain about this when they get a bill from the waiter and the waiter doesn't know, or even the people paying the bill don't know how to calculate the tip, right? And so we get out our calculator and we do it that way. That's kind of become an indispensable part of our lives at this point, especially we just have it in our pocket. I think AI could potentially be that in a manner of speaking, because it'll be in our pocket as well. We already have the internet in our pocket. This is just a better way to access in a lot of ways. So a little bit more about education. So I mentioned my 8-year-old daughter. She likes to open up our TV, and it has like a voice command where you can tell it to generate weird images, and she has a lot of fun with this, and that's fairly harmless. But she's kind of at this lower step, right, where she's kind of passively interacting. She's telling it what to do, and it's spitting something fun back at her. But as we move up into higher levels of education, you have students using AI to augment their thinking is the hope, and if that continues, then when they get into the workforce, they're going to have much more advantages than we ever had, because we're just learning this now. Even somebody in my position, like, I'm not caught up. Pastor mentioned you're all trying to catch up too. I'm not caught up. I don't think I ever could catch up because it moves so fast, and I'm not a web developer, a technology person. I'm a librarian, so I'm doing my best to keep up. But like these, I say kids, but these kids growing up with this technology will be just much better at using it. And if we teach them how to use it correctly as an assistive tool rather than something to do all the work for them, then the ways in which they could potentially use it are like unfathomable to us, I think. So there is hope. Okay, we're waiting. I want to talk a little bit now about how to determine if something is real or fake, and how these models can give you false information. This is a kind of a specific example to me. I was having some heart palpitations, right? And I was like, what's going on? I tried to talk to my primary care doc. I couldn't get an appointment for a couple of weeks. Tried to get a specialist, couldn't get a specialist for a month. But then I could go onto any AI model and ask, hey, what's wrong with me? Put in my symptoms, and it'll give me an immediate answer. Was it the right answer? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. And I know some doctors, but I'm not a doctor. So that immediate feedback is something that I think we all want. We'd all want it from our doctors, but there's not enough doctors, and there's not enough time for these doctors to help everybody. So there's a trade-off here. Like, do you get the immediate answer that like calms you down somehow, or do you wait 6 weeks and then your symptoms are either gone or they're worse? This is kind of the trap that I think people can fall into with AI, particularly myself included, because we want that answer. And then, kind of specific to my field, in medical education, we look at scholarly journals a lot, which are where doctors kind of get their information, right? They're all about tests and what clinical trials people have done. And if you ask AI to find these things, it'll often give you the wrong answer, because one thing that AI is it's sycophantic. It wants to give you the right answer. It wants to give you an answer, even if it's the wrong answer. So this is where prompt engineering, which is like how to ask the AI what you want, becomes really important. Because the more specific you are, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, but the more specific you are, the less likely it's going to hallucinate and give you the wrong answer. And this this is something fundamental to the way it's built that I don't think will change, and it's all based on that probability engine, because it's essentially guessing the next thing you want to hear, next word you want to hear, and so it's always probably going to spit out a wrong answer because it has to give you an answer. If it doesn't give you an answer, then it's not performing its function. So what I have here, it's a little stretched out up here, but I have President Obama shooting hoops with Anthony Edwards and LeBron James. One of these images is fake. Does anybody know? If you kept up with some news on ESPN, you might know the answer to this, but one of these two is fake. Any guesses as to which might be the fake one? LeBron or Anthony? So let's see. If you've kept up with the news, you know there's a video on ESPN's YouTube about President Obama playing horse with Anthony Edwards. So that's the real one. The right one is an image that I edited with Google Gemini, which is a regular chatbot. I gave it a very simple prompt, told it, can you replace Anthony Edwards with LeBron James? And it gave me this image. Now this is not a generated image, right? But it is an edited image with AI. And this is where the danger comes in, right? Because this is fairly harmless, but you can imagine in the political sphere or whatever, if something like this comes out, and it's different people, or even personally, if it's someone you know with someone that you think is dangerous, and you see this image, your first instinct is to panic. So some subtle clues, and this is kind of tricky because so I actually mixed up the pictures, but the left is LeBron with the ball, the right is Ant-Man with the ball. The way he's holding the ball on the right, it's mid-dribble, but it kind of looks fake because it looks like he's glued to the ball. So you might think, oh, that's the AI one. But if you look at the left image, there's some garbled words underneath that Nike swoosh that I don't think that exists. It doesn't even create a word, right? You can see it's pretty clearly the start of the word Wilson, which is a basketball brand, on the right ball. The left one just has some nonsense. And this is one thing that AI is not very good at, is putting words onto pictures. I don't know why that is, but it's not. I had a few instances where I tried to put librarian on something and it couldn't spell librarian, no matter how many times I asked it. So that's one way to potentially see something, but you'd have to be looking pretty close, right, to figure that out. So this is kind of some ways to spot a fake. Some of these are outdated, actually, even as of the time of this presentation. But something I've noticed lately is the teeth, like when you see an AI image, and this is particularly prevalent in videos, if the teeth are just perfect, like beyond what dentistry could actually perform. AI doesn't seem to understand that people have all kinds of different teeth, defects in their teeth, crooked teeth, whatever it is. Like if you see somebody with perfect teeth in a video or a picture, it might be worth questioning it. The hand thing is something that the AI is actually largely fixed, but like a couple of years ago, you would see, and it still happens sometimes, but you would see AI images of people with like 6 fingers. Sometimes there'd be a third arm coming out of their back to do some more stuff. It was weird, and it was nice because it was like an indication that this is not real. Another way to look, and this is more textual, but in vocabulary, like there are some words that people don't use in their everyday life. And AI is kind of like evolved a little bit in this. About a year ago, the word delve, D-E-L-V, which means to like mine and find gems and stuff, but it's used as a metaphor to like go deeper into a conversation or something. Nobody uses that word. Unless you're like reading fantasy books or something, you're not going to see the word delve too often. But AI was using it all the time whenever it would spit out an answer at somebody. And so you could pretty easily say, okay, this is probably AI because I don't think this person is using the word delve in their writing. Another way was this, and this is still pretty prevalent, and I'm sure AI will correct this, but there's a punctuation mark called the M dash, and it's essentially 2 dashes kind of pushed together to make a long dash, and it kind of denotes a pause in a sentence, kind of like a semicolon or a colon would. It's just a different way to do that. But very few people even know that the M dash is a thing to use, let alone use it as much as you'll see in a lot of writing. And this, and particularly, I do admissions interviews and reviews for the med school. And when we see an essay coming with like a bunch of M dashes like this, we're pretty certain that like somebody used AI to do that. So, like I said, these iterate rapidly. It's difficult to keep up with what's the new thing that AI is doing that people don't do. And you kind of just have to be like using it a lot to figure that out. This is a video, I don't think it might play. If you've watched any Pistons games lately, you've probably seen this video because Mike Morris advertises Pistons games every day. Let's see if it plays.
So, Michael, nothing feels better than a win?
Nope.
So yeah, this is a completely fabricated video, obviously. And we can tell that because unicorns don't exist that I'm aware of. And Mike probably wouldn't be doing these things like rafting in a full suit, I don't think. He'd probably have different gear on. And I don't like that. I don't like that that exists, but it's relatively harmless in the grand scheme of things. But what's not harmless is like what people could do with this technology beyond, an advertisement for a lawyer firm. And there's sort of a spectrum, right? It's obviously that video is obviously fiction. We know that this person's likely not doing these things, but let's take the example on the right. You have a deep fake of a CEO announcing a giant merger of two big companies, right? Well, if that's fake, then you might have the stock market just reacting crazily and like trickling down to everybody in some crash. This is where things get dangerous. And this note on the right that says, the strategy of malicious actors is not just to fool you once, but to flood your feed until you no longer have the time or energy to figure out what's real. And this is what I think, particularly in the political field, we might be seeing in the coming years. And we're already seeing the White House releases fake AI things all the time now. Love it or hate it, but it happens. And we have elections coming up that could potentially have big ramifications. And I think we're going to see this kind of thing. And I don't know that I have the answers to tell you how to distinguish between what's going to be real and what's not, other than to, kind of trust your gut and like try to think about what you're seeing and even ask other people around you, specifically people who might have more tech-minded aspirations, like kids. Let's see. Okay, so this is something that I wanted to specifically bring to this community is, I think we're all familiar with robocalls. You get a call from somebody that claims to be a Saudi prince who needs, your help to get his millions back, and he'll give you some as well. Same with the phishing emails, and I get tricked by phishing emails now. That's how sophisticated they become. We have phishing emails come into Oakland that are from Oakland email addresses from students who actually exist, but they're phishing emails because they've been altered or hacked somehow. It gets so sophisticated with phishing now that they're using the spacing in between letters to trick people. So like, I'll get something from oakland.edu, but there'll be a tiny space between the oak and the land that I can't even tell, and so I don't even know it's fake. And if you see a link in an email and you're not sure, don't click it. That's the phishing rule of thumb. But now, if your kids, grandkids, whoever have like a TikTok or something, a YouTube channel, scammers can take that, clone their voice, and call you with that voice so that you think your grandchild is calling you in trouble. So there are steps you can take, obviously. Establish a safe word if you want with your loved ones. You can verify. The big thing is to verify. Like, if you get a call from your grandkids asking if they're in trouble, call their kid or call your kids and their parents and figure out if that's the case. There's some more here about this. This is kind of good steps for that. Pause. They rely on you to, the scammers rely on you to have an emotional response, right? So if you pause, think about it, just give it a minute, that kind of diffuses that a little bit. Trace it, find the source. Again, call your kids, call somebody close to the situation to figure out if this is actually the case. And then verify. You can do research. If they say they're from a specific company, you can go onto Google and look at this company and see if they exist and that kind of thing. So there are ways to fight this, but we're going to have to evolve kind of with it because they evolve and they find new ways to scam us and all this stuff. And then a little bit about data. So most people are concerned about data privacy at this point. You type something, you're worried about your email. Is your email secure? Your medical records, are those secure? That's data that could be, given to somebody. Google, these big tech companies want to buy everyone's data so that they can advertise to you, and that makes them money. As far as AI goes specifically, when you type something into a chatbot like ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it is, those words that you're typing are going to train that model. They're going into the model to make it more effective. There are some settings you can turn on and off in these applications, but they're kind of buried and difficult to find. But the point is that once you put your data, like if you put medical, like I'll go back to my example about having heart palpitations, right? So if I would have put, I don't know, a medical record into this chatbot, that's then now out there for somebody else. Basically, when somebody else will do some kind of search on AI, your stuff could actually show up without you having any say in it and even knowing that it's there. So kind of the golden rule is watch what you input. I like to think of data as almost a physical object, like put it in a safe as much as that as possible. Treat it like it's a physical thing that you need to keep safe if you don't want it out there. Some people aren't as concerned. Let's see. Okay. This is kind of wrapping up a little bit, but this is something that happens with every new technology. It's called the hype cycle. Things will become, crazy hyped, and then something will happen and it'll fall off, and it'll kind of enter sort of a negative zone, and then at some point it'll plateau out. And this is where we hope the AI gets to, is this like plateau of productivity where it's useful, not dangerous. And it's hard to use the internet analogy because the internet can still be quite dangerous, but this is where we hope things get, because we want it to be productive but not replace anything, whether it's jobs, whether it's thinking. Kind of one way to think about it is in the late 90s, tech companies invested billions into websites and certain websites, and not a lot of websites knew how to make money, and so there was no return on investment. And that's happening now with AI as well. Microsoft, Google, they're investing a lot of money into these big technologies, and they're not really making much back because it's tricky to monetize this. They'll figure it out because they want to make money, but it's tricky. So core message here is, AI is not magic. It hopefully is not apocalyptic. It's just another way to find information that could advance the way we kind of, disseminate, think about information, and access it. Whoops, backwards. So this is a little bit of a blueprint for moving forward. A few different realms here. Be skeptic. Protect those who are most vulnerable, whether it's some of or just anybody. Again, deploy that pause, trace, verify method. Protect your data. Protect your mind. Don't let it do the thinking for you. Let it give you information that you can then think about. Let AI summarize, but don't let it make any decisions. Like, that's not what we want. And then as far as like education and our young folks go, we have to encourage them to use it as a tool, not a crutch, so that when they get to wherever they're going, they utilize it better than we could, but it hasn't replaced their minds, right? And I think that's about all I have. On my side here? Yeah. So again, my name's David Stewart, professor at OUWB, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not going to have answers to every question, I can guarantee that, but I'm happy to answer what I can. I'll come down here. you'll see these robots doing all kinds of fancy tricks and stuff. And they have put AI into robots, and trying to think what there were consequences that they didn't expect, and so I think they quickly pulled it out. But yeah, I think it's totally a thing. I went to the airport the other day, and there was a robotic chair just like going right through the airport, just by everybody. And I'm sure that was all. It was like an app where somebody said, "Give me this chair to this location." But I think to maybe talk to the fear of that a little bit. Again, like even if the AI is in the robot, the AI is still just a math problem. I mean, that's the way to think about it. Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a huge fear. That's a fear even of me, because like as somebody who finds information for somebody, like if this can do it better than I can, then I'm out of a job, right? Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, so I'll be honest. There are some inroads being made towards these AI bots being able to prescribe like medication, which to me is kind of scary. But I don't know, maybe there's a threshold there. It's like if you want to prescribe a painkiller or something, that's one thing. If you want to prescribe like insulin, that's another. I don't know what the thresholds would be, but yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. I mean, I'll be honest. But it is definitely something that's developing. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if your doctor had info. Yeah, I could pass the mic. I don't know if that'll be. Yeah. Mm. No, you have a good reason to be. Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I think we all have that fear, and there's been that even before the AI thing. I think everyone just kind of assumes your phone's listening and sending that stuff back to Apple or Google, whoever is using your phone. They would claim otherwise, right? They claim that they have protections in place. I don't know that we can ever trust one of these big companies, honestly. And so, as far as AI is concerned, I mean, the AI companies have gotten in trouble for doing this. Like when they first were rolling this stuff out, um, they weren't supposed to like scrape all the YouTube videos, for instance, but they did, and they went to court over it. I don't know what the outcome was. I'm sure they got away with it because it's still out there. It's still in the models. Essentially, just like scanning it, copying it, kind of thing. Yeah, that's what they do for the internet. They just scrape all the information. Think of it like two arms scraping all the information into this giant model. So yeah, I think. Yeah. I mean, you could. I mean, you could think about the models as a robot. Yeah. 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 Just like a computer. Yeah. Yeah. But it is robotic surgery overseen by a surgeon, right? I think that's maybe the important part. Is human oversight needs to be still present in the AI stuff. Like, um, and a lot of that's going to come down to legislation at some point, I think. So we have to elect the right people. Because if the Department of Education says, no, you can't replace your teachers with AI, then they're not going to do it. But the tech companies will probably try to get away with what they can. And that's like just an unfortunate reality. Yeah. It's supposed to be triggered to do that. Like you're supposed to say, hey, Siri, and then it starts listening. That's the theory. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think that's a good example of how the pros and cons of what we're looking at with AI. It's like there will be stuff that it's better at, but like I said, there has to be oversight of that robot in the surgery room. There has to be AI oversight as well. Like we have to be the ones in charge. I think is the main takeaway. And yeah, it tells you what you want to hear. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, it's already replaced jobs for sure. I like to play video games, and a lot of what video game developers do is stuff that AI can just do much easier and potentially a lot faster, which is important. Again, it's all about making money. In the end, like these companies want to make money off this, and these large companies want to make money, so they're going to do what they have to do to. And we just have to be ready to fight that in some way. Yeah. that's kind of the crux of what I was talking about data privacy is like if you, and it's difficult because like you said, you don't know what's listening to you. And this has been like, this is predates AI, is like the whole targeted ad stuff. You type something into Amazon, Google starts advertising the same thing to you. Again, that's how they make the money, and that's what their focus is. And I don't have a good answer for, other than shutting stuff off, right? Like if you disengage to an extent, you're going to avoid some of that. I watched a video about, it was a TED Talk actually, and it was a guy who does, he looks at the images, his whole company is about verifying whether an image is real or not, right? And he's got a lot more business now because of AI. And he has all these high-tech methods, which was comforting because if something goes to court and you know they're trying to use fake images, somebody like this could come in and say that's fake. But the point is, like his advice at the end was like, get off social media. Like that's a trap. It's a trap for these companies to get your data. It's a trap for them to advertise to you, which I know stinks because people want to connect, talk to your family, see pictures. But if we're engaging with the things that are stealing our data, then they're going to steal our data. Like that's just the reality of it. I wish there was a better answer, but, and there's better answers in some cases. There's like alternatives to Twitter, for instance, if you use Twitter, that are not as, you know, data stealing. But these social media companies have become so ingrained in people's lives that it's difficult. And I don't know. If I find out what the answer is, I won't bring it back to you all. But I don't know. I'm a little frightened about that. I've mostly gotten rid of social media myself, just because for that reason, just to protect myself to an extent, I guess. Yeah. I mean, that's a tricky one because, like, even before AI, I feel like there was a problem with people critical thinking, and I'll tie this back to social media. Like, if you take all your information and news from these potentially self-serving sources, like it's going to be more difficult to critically engage and think on these issues for yourself. And so I think, like, referring back to one of the slides I showed, having these active discussions with other human beings and getting your information, your news from, you know, trusted sources. And what is that anymore? I mean, newspapers are kind of disappearing, right? The daily news is, all these news companies are owned by giant corporations. I don't have a good answer for that either, but yeah, critical thinking, I think, well, finding trusted sources, like I'm going to plug librarians, for instance. Like nobody gets into librarianship to be rich, right? Like we don't make money. We do it because we want to help people find good information. So like find those sources in your life that will give you as good of information as they can, and then like engage with the people around you, I think, because I think most people are smart enough, and when they get in conversation, to figure out what's wrong and what's right in terms of information. And a lot of that just boils down to trusting your gut, not acting emotionally when you see something, like trying to tamp that down a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. It's like I said, these are problems that predate AI. Like we've had this for decades where we used to just read books and that was it. That was where the information came from, or the newspaper or the daily news, but that is not our world now. So if anybody has any better answers, I'd love to hear them. Yeah. That's, yeah. Yeah. That's a good question because it's hard to say. Like I said, right now AI is not making the people who create AI, it's not making them any money. So they're going to try to figure out ways that it's going to make them money, and then it could transform the same way that, like, when you did a Google search 15 years ago, you got a very different set of answers than you do now. Like now you do a Google search, the first 10 things are probably advertisements, and then the next 10 things are results that have been optimized based on how how much optimizing the companies that those results are did to make them show up. Like it's no longer an easy way to find information, which AI kind of does a better job than Google now. Like I said, for now. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to affect our individual money, because it's going to be part of a stock market that's going to affect everybody at some point. That's how it would affect, like your bank account, for instance, or your retirement or whatever it is. I can speak to that a little bit in terms of like, so one thing, I was part of an AI task force that tried to provide guidelines to the people teaching our med students, right, how to use AI or how not to use AI. And the thing that we emphasized the most was that, use it as a tool, don't let it replace anything that you're doing. But also, like, it affords you this opportunity, and this is part of that note-taking thing I said, how some clinics are using it to note-take and have better face-to-face conversations with their patients. Then that is the hope that, particularly in medicine, there's this massive administrative burden. People have to plug in all this information into charts. It's just stuff that takes an enormous amount of time that is time that could be spent seeing other patients or, really bearing down on these patients that need help. So I think to that point, if in a perfect world, it would do exactly that. It would give us all more time to spend with other people. It would give us more time not to do the things that we don't want to do. I made this presentation with AI because I hate making presentations. Like I don't like the whole process of having to like design slides and stuff. So it did that for me, and I had more time to like put into the content, for instance. So that is like the ideal, but it just depends on how we choose to use the time that it's affording, like giving us back, right? Yeah. Now Bluetooth is basically just like a radio signal. It's just like when you turn on your radio, it's just a different like channel of waves going through the air. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, we have one of those for our kids. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Um, I mean, the no, I think that's a privacy thing. Uh, Again, like I would almost say most things can be hacked, but in terms of those tags specifically, that's just tied to an app on that specific phone. It should just communicate to that and not to, yeah, right. But if somebody could hack your phone, yeah, they could potentially hack that as well. That's just part of the danger of having a phone, I suppose, and having this internet in your pocket. But no, Bluetooth itself, totally independent of AI. It's just it's just signals bouncing from. It's like the internet, like Wi-Fi, just signals bouncing from one thing to the next. Yeah, but it should be private. Like I said, we took our kids to Disney World and wanted to have that specific thing just in case. And they worked well. Yeah, it doesn't pinpoint right exactly, but it does a good job. Any other questions? to- I told you I get tricked too. Like I got fished a few times this year in my email because I thought one of them I got was it was something about payroll, and so like as soon as you see something about your money, you click it. You're like, what's wrong? Where's my money? Um, I actually have a handout that you'll get at the end of this that has a few kind of just goes over some what I went over as far as like verify trace question, so that's some of that's in there. But I will take that suggestion and I'll see what I can do, and maybe I can develop just a short handout that, and like you said, this evolves so quickly that it's something that would have to be updated continually forever. But no, I think that's definitely something I can take back with me and figure out, and maybe, yeah. 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 Hmm. Hmm. Oh, that's smart. Yeah. Hmm. We don't even get that at the university level, so that's good to hear. I mean, that's important. I mean, they have a vested interest in not you guys not getting scammed, right? Like they're a county organization, but we don't get that in our daily lives, right? We don't have somebody overseeing us and telling us, check this out, check this out. So, yeah, for better or worse. Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's already if you're using Gmail or most people do, right? Or whatever email, there's already, in fact, AI is part of what fishes out or filters out those spam emails. So if you ever check your spam filter, a lot of that has been AI driven as far as how that gets filtered out. So there's a lot of that going on. Part of the sophistication of these phishing things is that they figure out ways to get around that filter specifically. So even if we build something new, they're probably going to try to figure out how to get around it. So while there is some of that going on, I think it is important to be aware and use these, these rules of verify, ask somebody hey, like don't click, I would just say don't ever click links in your email is like kind of a good rule of thumb that we're told actually at university level as well. Like don't click links unless you know exactly what it is and where it's coming from. And I'm sure as these companies continue, and they're always evolving, tech's always evolving, they might figure some of that out. But like I try not to be overly negative, but these tech companies are not like, they don't have our best interests at heart, right? They have their best interests at heart. And they have a curiosity that allows them to make this interesting technology that then comes to people, but they don't begin it with humans in mind, I don't think. That's kind of a personal opinion, though. So, grain of salt there. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Right. I mean, the cloud is just the internet. The easiest way to think about it is that you're just sending stuff to the internet. And the reason that they have cloud storage for things like pictures is because pictures are large, and a lot of us don't have enough room in our computer to store all that stuff. I pay Google $2 a month so that I can store all these pictures of my kids somewhere because I don't have the space. But theoretically, that is as protected as your email, for instance. Like, you're the only one who should be able to see it unless you share it with somebody else, like specifically. Again, hacking is always a thing. I think Google has a lot of protection against hacking. So if you're using Google and you're uploading pictures to your Google Drive, which is that cloud storage, it should be protected. It's nothing is foolproof, and I hope I've iterated that enough. Nothing is 100% safe except your physical location. But I would maybe, unless, and a lot of this is just computer literacy, right? If you don't know what settings are turned on, then you might have an auto upload cloud thing for pictures, and that's something you just have to, I would get with somebody who knows computers in your life, have them look through your settings and make sure that it's not automating anything like that if you don't want it on the cloud. That would be my advice for that. Yeah. Or go to the library, they'll help you there too. All right. You're welcome. Yeah. Actually, yeah. Yeah. Right. No, I'm happy to come back. And I was actually going to say, I mean, this was a very overview level, but one other thing that I do for med students and faculty is I teach them how to use specific tools as well. So that is also a potential that